So my name is Ian, and I'm filling in as a member of the...
Story for all ages is kind of one most of you are familiar with, so I tried to jazz it up a little so you wouldn't be bored. 5 very young students were on a field trip to an unusual zoo. The students had not experienced much in the world, and they didn't understand a lot about it. But they were having a good time and seeing all sorts of things they'd never seen or heard of before. It was a hands-on zoo where you could go right up and pet the animals. It was so cool. They went into a pool and got to pet a dolphin. That was so cool. Then they went into the bird sanctuary, and the birds came down and landed on their shoulders and started singing to them. But then one of the zookeepers said that there was an unusual animal that was usually out on the prairie, but it had gone into a cave, and the children would have to go into a cave in order to see it. But they thought that was a good adventure. So they started towards the cave, and they noticed it was very dark in that cave. So they stopped and they got a torch. And they took the torch into the cave with them, and they started going into the dark, and the path turned. So they turned it, somebody knocked somebody else by accident, and the torch dropped and it went out. And they were in the darkness. And they heard something up ahead, but they were told it was very safe. And they wanted that adventure. So they kept on going. But they put a hesitant hand out to make sure they didn't bump into anything. And the first student found something, and he said, "Oh, this animal, it's like a rope. It's long and thin." And then another student bumped into something and said, "Oh no, this is solid. It's like a wall." And the third student said, "No, it's smooth and has a very sharp tip, and it's kind of like a spear." And another student said, Why no, it's round and thick, kind of like a tree trunk." And the last student said, "No, it's very long and it moves around a lot like a snake." And they stood there arguing about what this creature was like. But the elephant was bored. He had heard this all before. So he turned around and walked out of the cave. Not too long ago, I saw a most interesting video entitled, "A Christian Visits a UU Church." It consisted of a traditional Christian interviewing a UU minister, and it was about an hour and a half long. They delved into lots of different ideas, and the minister calmly and patiently explained the UU position on all sorts of things. And sometimes the Christian responded about how he understood things. The minister brought out very clearly that not every UU would have the same answer to the questions, and that we have a huge variety of understandings. And she normalized it beautifully. That seemed stunning to the Christian, that we would welcome pagans, atheists, Buddhists, and all other sorts of theologies. So the minister, just at the end of the conversation, stopped and looked at the Christian, and he thanked her for not trying to convert him or trying to point out how he was wrong. And the minister looked slightly surprised and said she didn't think that conversion was the point of the interview. She thought he just wanted to learn about us. And the interviewer reiterated he was surprised that she had not taken advantage of the situation to convince him that he was wrong. Sometimes I forget how unusual that is in the rest of the world. What a gift it is that we just accept that we're not going to agree, and it doesn't matter. I am so grateful to have found that. I am so grateful to be a part of this movement where I can find usefulness in philosophies that I don't share. And I thank God I don't have to convert anyone. So now, if you will, take a moment for quiet. Get comfortable. Some of you may remember the comedian George Carlin. He might be best known for a skit on the 7 words you can't say on TV. Sometimes I think there's a similar list of words, the 7 words you can't say in a UU church. Sin, salvation, evil, prayer, worship, miracles, and God. I thought maybe it was about time to talk about one of them. And this is the scariest service I have ever given. Scary for me, not you. Scary because I'm quite sure I'm going to offend someone, and I don't want to do that. I'm probably going to offend folks who don't believe in God because they're going to spend the entire sermon wondering why on earth they bothered to come today. And I'm going to offend people who do believe in God because they have a completely different understanding of just what that word means, and what a disappointment I am. Anyway, if I step on your understanding, please forgive me. And know that I am only speaking for myself and my understanding of how things work, and I could be wrong. Please, take what you like and leave the rest. Or better yet, bring your ideas to the talkback after the service. And let's try and make room for each other. Okay, so let's begin. I am a theist. Do you know how much courage it takes to say that in a UU pulpit? The thing is, I might not be the only one who might think of themselves as theists. But in a UU church, we tend to hide because that's almost heresy. There are probably folks here that try to follow the teachings of Jesus. I know I do, but I'm not a Christian. I just think he had a really enlightened philosophy and some very good ideas on how to live. And you don't have to believe in God at all to find some value in that. Like most of us, my beginnings have a lot to do with my understandings. I was born into a highly religious family. Religion permeated every aspect of life. God was everywhere. But The theology of that religion, it was Christian Science, in case you're wondering, was highly unorthodox, and it did have at least two advantages. For one thing, when we prayed, it was to our Father, Mother, God. God didn't have a gender, or maybe God had all the genders. Today that has implications that I don't think Mrs. Eddy meant. Another advantage, I was almost 12 years old before I found out that some people actually believed in hell. In our family, hell was just part of the fairy tale, like trolls or evil fairy godmothers. It wasn't real. It wasn't something you believed in. How could you? God was good, and good simply could not create something evil, like hell. And God created everything, right? So if God didn't create hell, it doesn't exist. When I found out that some of my classmates did believe in it, I was astounded. But then I found out about the Holocaust. That started my doubts about God. Millions of men, women, and children murdered. Untold suffering. How could that have happened? Part of me wishes that I could believe in hell, just so there would be some sort of retribution, and then maybe I could forgive God for letting it happen. So many evils, like the Inquisition, witch hunts, genocide, slavery, factory farming, and vivisection. All that horrible suffering that innocents have experienced, I find that very hard to forgive. And I admit there are some individuals that I would have no trouble consigning to Hades. I think sometimes it's hard to forgive the universe or God for not getting the job you wanted, for not having the career you strive for, or worse yet, when that career turned out to be something quite different than you thought it was going to be. Forgiving whatever powers that be for expectations crushed, for the wrong candidate winning the election, for dreams unfulfilled, or the death of a loved one. It can be hard. I have heard people try to explain such horrors by saying, God works in mysterious ways. If we could but see the long view, we would understand and forgive. I don't buy that. If there is a God, and she is omnipotent and omniscient, and she did nothing to stop the Holocaust, nothing can justify that. Nothing. It is unforgivable. There is no possible excuse that could get God off the hook. But maybe God didn't have anything to do with that. Maybe that was us, humans. We did that. One person I know says that sometimes to say that God works in mysterious ways is really just a way to let ourselves off the hook. We don't have to take the blame if God allows us to do something dreadful. That's very convenient, isn't it? We don't have to look at our responsibilities that way. We don't have to take the blame if God allows us to do something dreadful. Convenient. I believe it is the comedian Ricky Gervais that was talking with a Christian who accused him of being an atheist. He looked at her and said, in all the various cultures and different corners of the world, there are at least 1,000 ideas of God. And you've gone down the list and you have rejected all but your particular idea of God. I just added one more to the list I didn't believe in. We don't very often hear about the different ideas of God. And I'm going to briefly explore a couple of them, and I'm not even going to scratch the surface, and I know it. First, I'd like to invite you to go back in time about 27 billion years, because that's the latest figure I've heard of when the universe began. And an awful lot of folks believe in God because they think there had to be someone or something that started it all. For a moment, let us assume that is true. God or gods got together, maybe they were bored, so they created the universe as having something to do. But the universe is pretty big. We don't even know how many galaxies there are. Astronomer David Koresh says, we don't know if the universe is infinite or not. Some astronomers think that we may live in a multiverse where there would be other universes like ours, maybe in another dimension, or maybe many dimensions. Now, the universe is such a vast concept that my tiny little human mind cannot fathom how much there is to it. And because of that, I do have trouble thinking that the entity that created billions of trillions of galaxies cares about my tiny little life. That would be such hubris on my part to think that I'm that important. Okay, so what if there is a layering of divinity, that there's an overgod who created everything, and then a bunch of underlings that take over different parts, and you keep on going until you get one God that just takes care of the planet Earth? Yeah, but there are 8 billion people on this planet? And that's only counting humans. We have no idea if other life forms might be more important to God. Heck, it seems to me the most important life form is the lowly earthworm. They create dirt, for heaven's sakes, that the rest of us need to exist. So with that understanding that there is a near infinite universe with an uncountable number of beings on this planet alone, why would anyone think that the idea of God as someone who gives a darn about us, why would they think that might exist? It seems to me I've just given a good argument for why I should not be a theist. So why on earth would I say I am? Because I am. Because, like each of you, I have come to my understandings based on my life experience. Like the students in the story for all ages, we might each experience a different aspect of reality that seems incompatible with other views, but maybe that's just because we humans, with our tiny understandings and highly limited experiences, just don't see the full picture. While I am a theist, I'm not at all sure I believe in God. Certainly not the God most people are talking about. God, that's a loaded word. It brings to mind the painting on the Sistine Chapel of an old man with a long beard, very powerful. That's not even close to my understanding. And there's nothing wrong with it. It's just not at all what I experience. Earlier, I mentioned that a lot of people think there has to be a God because somebody had to create the universe. But what if it's the other way around? What if the universe was already here and God grew up from the bottom? We've all heard of folks who had near-death experiences. There have been thousands of such reports from every corner of the globe. An interesting point is that despite different cultures and religions, folks tend to report very similar experiences. There's a long tunnel with a bright light at the end of it. And when you get there, it's a remarkably beautiful place, so loving. And those who have gone on before are waiting for you. In my case, it's probably going to be cats. Now, after that, what happens gets a little fuzzy, probably because those who had a near-death experience couldn't stay around long enough to find out what's next. But there are a number of theories. Some folks believe we are born again, presumably here on Earth and hopefully as a human. Some believe that we may become guardians for those we loved but left behind. Maybe we become their guardian angels. Still others think that we don't come back at all, we just go on. We continue to grow. Now, if we're going to continue to grow, what are we going to evolve into? Some think we might become angels or whatever the next life form is called. But what if that growth continued? That we become more loving, more powerful, more insightful? What if one of us grew, evolved, and eventually, in effect, became God? What if God is one of us? Someone who had gone on before just kept growing. Or what if God is not all-powerful and all-knowing, just more powerful and more knowing than we are? What if God isn't a person at all, but a collection of everything that is, God in everything? Maybe God in everything, but God is still more than just everything put together. What if God is a collection of principles on how the universe works? Kind of like the Force out of Star Wars. No personality there, just laws or principles we might not fully understand, but affect us like gravity or atomic theory. Principles that when we align ourselves with them, give us a more harmonious life. So God may not be a personality, but a force, principles in action, so to speak. But sometimes, when I am open to it, there is something there, not me, connected, but not me. It is aware. And whatever it is, it wants positive things from me and for me. It feels very personal and very real. Is that God? Maybe I'm just talking to myself. Maybe it's just a longing not to be alone in the universe. Maybe it's my imagination based on what I was told as a child. I don't know. Some people experience the divine, for lack of a better term, when they hear an astounding piece of music. Some folks experience the divine when they're in a large cathedral filled with light coming through stained glass windows. Some experience it at the birth of a child or at the deathbed of a loved one. And a lot of folks experience it when they're out in nature, watching a sunset perhaps, or standing on a cliff overlooking the ocean, or just being close to trees and the wind. It seems to feel like a connection of some sort. And maybe that's what God is, connection. It's all very mysterious. Mystery. That's the thing. The whole question of God, of us, why we are here, it's a mystery. And maybe like the understanding of an elephant, it's all true at the same time, even when things seem to contradict. Reverend Kim Crawford Harmony says one of the things UU offers is refusing to settle for cheap certainty. So why am I giving a sermon about God? Well, partly because I want to say in a UU church, it's okay if you believe in something higher than yourself. Just as it's okay if you don't. Personally, I can't even imagine a God so petty that it mattered whether or not we believed in her. I'm talking about God partly because as a theist in a UU church, I think it's not unreasonable for us to get a turn once in a while. I don't hear about God very much. Last time I heard about God in a UU church was over 15 years ago, and I was the one in the pulpit. If occasionally I want to explore the idea of God, then maybe there are other theists here who feel the same way. And where else are we gonna go? Most of us have understandings that our more orthodox friends and family might not be open to. And shouldn't we be able to talk about such things with our fellow church folks where it's safe? And partly because I gave this sermon because where else can any of us go to explore the mystery without having to worry about being converted? So that's my sermon for today. I have asked questions that I don't have answers to. I proposed ideas which may or may not work for you. And I hope I made it safe for all of us to share, even if we think very differently from those around us. take what you like and leave the rest. All of us face life questions regardless of how we answer them. And I would hope that we learn from each other and maybe even take a certain amount of comfort from one another. I would hope that we could support each other, regardless of where we're coming from. We do have vastly different understandings, and I like that. A few years ago, I shared a poem with you, and I'm sorry to be repeating, but I want to share it again. My church. I would not want to go to a church where there were no pagans. I would miss the reverence for nature and the promise of magic. I would not want to go to a church where there were no Christians. I would miss the emphasis on love and forgiveness. I would not want to go to a church where there were no agnostics. I would miss the constant, honest questioning. I would not want to go to a church where there were no Buddhists. I would miss the stillness, the mindfulness. I would not want to go to a church where there were no Muslims. I would miss the concern for the well-being of all. I would not want to go to a church where there were no atheists, because I would miss the love of science and knowledge. I would not want to go to a church where there were no Jews. I would miss the sense of tradition rooted in history. I would not want to go to a church where there were no humanists, because I would miss the appreciation of human potential. I would not want to go to a church that lacked any of these, because, you see, I am greedy. I want it all. I want my spiritual path to be crowded with seekers of goodwill, excited about life's questions, open to possibilities, passionate about justice, looking for answers, reaching out a helping hand, and loving life. Like what I said earlier, take what you like and leave the rest. And please do join us in the conference room for the talk back.